Welcome back to Rise to Liberty podcast. Today is a very special interview, one I've been waiting for quite a while, and I was finally able to scare him. So today I am joined with Derrick Broze. How you doing today, Derrick?
Hey, I'm good, man. It's always cool to start a show with a nice breakdown.
Yeah, right. I always thought that was a good way to get everyone pumped, right, for whatever conversations that we end up having. So, let's just jump straight into it. Who's Derrick?
Derrick is me. I'm an individual. I'm a free human, originally from Texas, living in Mexico now. I've been doing various forms of activism and journalism and all that entails in a variety of ways for 14 years now, after having, I guess you could say, a wake-up experience in 2009 as far as politics go. I'm a flawed human like everybody else. I'm a human in the healing process, recovering from trauma from a young age, which, that journey greatly influences the way I approach my activism and journalism. For example, my website, The Conscious Resistance, which I launched in 2013, is about this intersection of liberty, truth, freedom, conspiracy, questioning, these sort of things, as well as that what I call the inner struggle for freedom against your inner tyrant, your doubts, fears, insecurities, limiting beliefs, which each of us in different ways struggle with at different points in our life for different circumstances. And to me, being able to face those things head on, to heal those wounds and overcome them, is part of the process of becoming a more whole human. And as we each hopefully work towards becoming more whole humans, then we can create a better world. But, so my work's very much about that. Not just my work, but, the way I try to live my life as well, because my journalism and my activism is not just I guess you could say, a hat I put on the weekend or something like that. It is really, truly the way I try to live my life every day. So, the message of the conscious resistance, the message in my books and my talks and articles, etc., is really just my method of trying to connect with other people who give a shit. When I first woke up, I remember the feeling of feeling super alone, like probably most people. And I also come from like a promotion background. I've been in bands my whole life and booked shows and grew up listening to punk and metal. So I was out always putting up flyers in the street and putting up posters, promoting some local show. And I lived in houses where we did house shows and things like that. So I kind of already had that sort of energy with me. And then when I got into activism, I just carried that into it of like, I'm going to go to the streets and talk to people and hand out flyers and put up posters. And, but it was, instead of being about music only, it was about these ideas. And really it was driven by feeling alone and just like, I need to find other people. I need to connect with other people, because the few people that I had from, say, like my old punk music background, whatever, despite having the trappings of being anti-system and rebellious, were very much couldn't give a shit, about doing anything. They were more nihilistic and apathetic than anything. But eventually, I found one or two friends who didn't think I was crazy, and I started an activist community in 2010. And that really, honestly, I can say changed the trajectory of my life, got me really involved on the local level back in Houston, Texas, and confronting politicians, confronting cops, and eventually realizing like, hey, the local media really sucks at their job. They're calling us a local group of conspiracy theorists because, we're gathering and hosting events and things like that. And that really spurred me on to say, maybe I should pick up a camera and just go to press conferences and ask questions, and then eventually taking it more seriously. And now it's become my full-time gig, just writing articles, writing books, and trying to spread the word. I mean, it's still, I think, all about trying to build community ultimately. Now the community has grown from just being like on the local level where I was originally at in Texas to trying to create really international, worldwide community.
Yeah. So when you like woke up, was it like a light switch moment, or was it gradual?
I think it was, in some ways it was light switch, but there was multiple lights to switch on, I'll say. So for example, like I mentioned, like I woke up politically in 2009, but my first waking up was when I went to prison at 20 years old. I got out of high school. I graduated high school early, but I was intelligent. I was in advanced classes, all that kind of crap. But most people knew me as the crazy kid who was getting into fights and getting arrested, because I was just, again, dealing with a lot of trauma that I didn't really have the tools for how to process. And So when I eventually, I was going to quit school, I was able to graduate a semester early. So I went into community college while my friends were finishing up the second half of senior year. And then I started drinking a lot. I started partying a lot. And between 18 till pretty much 20, when I got arrested the week before I turned 21. I pretty much just went down that rabbit hole of like, okay, I'm going to be the drunk guy at the party all the time, puking everywhere. Then I'm going to be barred out on Xanax all the time then do that. And then ecstasy until I'm a zombie. And I was just bouncing from like one thing to the next. And eventually I tried crystal meth, some friends who got into that. And within 10 months, I was locked up. Within 6 months, I was homeless. Like it really was kind of I think if you were looking from the outside, and now with the benefit of hindsight, I can look back and see like, yeah, there was a clear trajectory going on there.
Yeah.
I was headed towards some bad things, but of course you can't really see it when you're in it. That was really my first waking up experience, because I had to wake up in a different way. It really had nothing to do with government or conspiracies or any of that kind of stuff yet. I had always been anti-government, like like a punk kind of rebel without a cause type way, but not any sort of deep philosophical sense. So it's not like I trusted the government, but I wasn't paying attention because, and this again goes back to why I call my work the conscious resistance, or often I'll refer to it as holistic activism or even holistic anarchism, is that yes, we have to talk about the systems that aren't working outside and build parallel ones to them and try to offer alternatives. But one of those most important ones, which people often overlook, is like our internal relationship, the way we communicate with ourselves, the way we process our emotions, the way we treat other people. And that was really what I started waking up to. I realized like, okay, when I finally got my sentence, I was going to be locked up for at least a year. And when I had to finally accept that there was nothing my parents could do, or my girlfriend or my lawyer, I could be on the phone all day and cry all day if I wanted, I could be angry, whatever, but none of it was going to change that I wasn't leaving these four walls until they let me leave. And, that's a very difficult thing to face. I think it's actually kind of really empowering in one way, because most of us, we are blessed to have, for the most part, generally speaking, in the modern world, fairly easy lives. Like, of course, we all have our own struggles and things like that, but we're not living the way we were living 150 years ago, where life is just a constant struggle against death. So because of that, there's benefits, but the downside is we also are sometimes very complacent and things are easy to us. But when you have all that taken away and you're just in a 4x4 box where you no longer can decide when you go take a crap, or, you have to take a crap in front of everybody. You can't go to sleep when you want. You can't, there's all these restrictions, right? And you can't leave. And you can either, what most people do is like, you can either try to resist it and fight it, but that really slows your time down. Like literally time feels like it's going by so slow. And I was doing that in the beginning, the first couple of weeks. Eventually you have to just accept it, so that you can, as much as you don't want to let go of the outside world and worry about what your friends and family are up to, if you're stuck on that all day, you won't get past what you're actually living through. So you kind of have to let go of the outside a little bit and be present where you're at. But that's not fun, because you're in a place filled with anger and fear and racism and just all kinds of dumb stuff that, is just the reality of in the world in there. And that feeling, though, of being truly powerlessness is what I consider to be my first kind of waking up, because it was that then caused me to say, okay, like I'm stuck here. There's nothing I can do. I can cry, I can scream, whatever. I need to make the most out of this next 11 months here. It was going to be a minimum of 11 months, and try to get what I can out of it. And also because I come from a background of, like, my birth father was in and out of prison my entire life. I saw him probably less than 10 times in my entire life. And he actually died of a drug overdose a few years back. I had drug and alcohol problems on both sides of my family, watched my uncles go to jail, and this and that. So it was something that was very common in my experience growing up, but it was a real kick in the nuts to get arrested. Like, oh man, I've been mad at this dude my whole life, and here I am, I'm doing the same thing, And I didn't have any kids at the time, but I did have like a 13-year-old, a brother who were 13 years apart, and he was very little at the time. And I'm getting like sad letters from him. And I'm just thinking, I wrote these kind of letters to my dad when he was locked up. I need to figure this out. I can't, keep that cycle going. That was the real wake up for me. That was the first light switch that went off, because in that process, I started journaling. I'd pretty much always been an anti-religious person, and I pretty much still am. But I would say I was able to finally separate like creation, divinity, God, whatever you want to call it, from religion, and like find something internally and externally that gave me some hope, and got into prayer, got into meditation. I started studying Zen Buddhism while I was locked up. and journaling every day. And that really saved my life. It like helped me get not only getting off the drugs and everything with time, like my brain got more clear and my thoughts got more clear, but I could really see like, oh man, I've been like going down this road, and then starting to do some of that healing work in relation to my lack of relationship with my father. That was all the very beginning. That was like waking up. Then when I got out the next year, October 2008, first time it was November 2006. When I got out, I it was like looking at the world with a fresh set of eyes again. Like, even though I was a felon now, I was broke, and like all these barriers up against me, I was the happiest that I'd ever been, probably happy for the first time in my life, because the depression had started to lift. A lot of the trauma I was starting to work on. It wasn't perfect, of course. This is a lifelong journey, but that was the beginning of me really just starting to like be grateful for simple things. And then, with time, unfortunately, I would go back and forth. I ended up doing 19 months in Texas state institutions when it was all said and done. I got out October 2008. And that was, of course, 1 month before Obama got elected to be the United States president. And again, I wasn't political really anyway. I didn't trust Obama. I didn't vote for Obama or anything like that. I was kind of watching it all with this skepticism of like, okay, I just woke up. I realized like I was starting to just realize like, I don't think the world is what I've been told. And then there was other little things, like somebody came up to me at a music festival and handed me a 9/11 was inside job sticker. And I took it to my music room and put it on the wall and didn't even like pay attention to it for maybe another year. And then finally I was like, let me search that phrase and see what's out there. And then, I read Rule by Secrecy by Jim Marrs. I read some other conspiracy books, watched some documentaries, and then it was all over. So it was like, first it was like this kind of spiritual, personal awakening. And then later the political, conspiratorial awakening came.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but eventually you went to a Ron Paul event. And then it was really just downhill from there.
Yeah, actually. So when I read Rule by Secrecy, I also read this book, Ron Paul's Revolution Manifesto. And that book was definitely super, it was like, I had never really even heard the word libertarian. I don't think so. Like at that point, if I had, I didn't really have any deep understanding. But I was starting to realize like the left-right paradigm is garbage. Like these Bush, Obama's doing the same thing as Bush. And, and I was like, okay, well, if that's not the case, it wasn't that I was looking for a third position per se, but a lot of what Ron Paul was saying, even though he was running in the Republican Party as a presidential candidate at that time, was very much like, okay, this guy's speaking my language. And in fact, whenever I started the activist group in 2010 called the Houston Freethinkers, actually the original Blogspot website still out there somewhere on the internet. The tagline was just like, this is not left, this is not right, this is not liberal or conservative, this is just free people, like we just free thinkers. It's kind of, so I didn't even really know any of these labels. I just knew I wasn't those things. And I wanted to be a part of a community that wasn't those things, but also could be welcoming to all kinds of people who just didn't fit in, like whether that's independents, free thinkers, libertarians, whatever. But yeah, I did definitely see around that time, this would have been like, I want to say late 2009, early 2010, as Ron Paul's preparing for his second presidential run, he came to the University of Houston and I got to hear him speak. And it honestly all happened within a week. I read Rule by Secrecy. I was reading Ron Paul's book. I watched Alex Jones's documentary Endgame, which is a classic, like scary doom, documentary, but unfortunately very correct. If you go back and watch it, he was right on point. And then at the same time, back to the breakdowns,
Oh, looks like we lost Derrick for a sec. His internet might have cut out. Let's see here. Well, looks like he left, so he'll be popping back in just a sec. So everything or everywhere you can find Derrick is actually linked in the episode description down below. I made sure to include his personal website, I believe his X profile, and the website for the Conscious Resistance. That is all in the episode description. So make sure and go check him out. Anybody watching this, if you do happen to have some questions, we might have a little time right at the very end to be able to answer a couple of questions. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to them. Let's see. Just waiting for him to pop back in for just a second. Let's see here. While we're doing this, go ahead. If you see this, if you can see the QR code right down there, that's my QR code. Go ahead and scan that, or go to risetoliberty.com/links, and go ahead and that will take you to the main master link. You can find all your favorite platforms and everything. We're streaming this on Rumble, X, and YouTube. Unfortunately, I really don't want to be over on YouTube, but even with all the alternatives, it's where all the people are. So until other platforms become more popular, which go ahead, head on over to Rumble, Odyssey. I've got all the platforms. We also have an audio podcast, which you can find on Podbean. You can also find on Apple, Samsung, Google, everywhere you possibly can think of. Oh, and it looks like he's back, so let's go ahead and pull him back up.
Sorry about that, man. The internet just totally crashed over here.
No worries.
So I could pick it up there. I was talking about breakdowns. I was basically saying that, so it was this, I don't know if you call it synchronicity. Also, excuse me if there's like some background noise. Some guy just started to start doing construction next door. But like I mentioned, I grew up listening to metal and punk, and a lot of the bands, they'll sometimes have like an anti-political message. But then you start to realize over the years, like, wait, some of these bands only speak up whenever it's a Republican office. Like, they don't really say anything when there's Democrats and all. And you're like, okay, they're not really awake either. They just like, whatever. But there was an amazing band. I still think they're amazing. They're not even really around anymore. Maybe one day they'll play another show. But for any other metalheads out there, the band is called Molotov Solution. And, it did feel like it was some sort of syncretist type of event, because I found Molotov Solution. I ended up going to the show to interview the singer, because his lyrics were literally talking about the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. And and then I realized he was quoting his lyrics were direct quotes from the book that I was reading at the time by Jim Marrs, Rule by Secrecy. And then it was just the combination of that, watching Alex Jones' Endgame, reading Ron Paul's book, hearing him speak, reading Rule by Secrecy, and then at the same time listening to this band that is literally just like the soundtrack to the revolution, and like quoting from the same books I'm reading. And all of that kind of converged on the fact that I also, after coming out of prison, was in a very open-minded state, I guess you could say, because after I finally got out and everything was done, and I'm back now in the world, but I'm a felon. And so now I've got all these other barriers to overcome. I can't get a job here. I can't get rented here. I started hanging out at the library a lot, and reading and checking out books, and again rediscovering my own intelligence and kind of my open-mindedness. And I first started by researching and investigating the drug war, and then realizing like, wow, I just experienced something that I had no idea there's this other bigger picture in the background going on. Because even though crystal meth is a very destructive thing, I don't think people like myself who are addicted should be thrown in cages just because they put something in their body. Like, I needed some more, like, whatever you want to call it, therapy or something other than just being thrown in a box. But I used the time for the best of it. My point is, though, it was this kind of combination of all of those was, I guess, the second awakening that brought me more into the political world, where the spiritual kind of personal development awakening had happened a couple of years prior to that. And then it was in 2013, after I lived sort of a double life for a couple of years of having my meditation groups and, psychonaut consciousness, psychedelic friends, and then activist friends. And those worlds were mostly like separated. I would go to the protest, and none of my friends from the meditation circle wanted to go to that, because they were like, don't talk about the negative things, no bad vibes here. And then I'd talk to my activist friends, and many of them were very much like atheist or just not interested in the spiritual journey. So they were kind of separate for the first few years of my activism. And then 2013 is when this idea of the conscious resistance came to me. And to me, I realized like, there's no way to separate these things. These are, in my view, part of the same effort, the same fight, the same struggle, like internal freedom and external freedom together, bringing those things together. That's like the real awakening in my mind. Yeah.
I mean, to me, it kind of seems, and, maybe this is a little cliche, but it's, true freedom comes from personal responsibility. And so it's always going to have to come internally first. I mean, we in my opinion, I don't think we could have a truly free society with people who are undisciplined internally. It doesn't seem
Absolutely.
like that's a possibility. It seems like it would be pure chaos, a more do what thou wilt sort of a society, and that's not freedom, at least in the way that
Yeah.
I understand it.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree. And I often tell people, like, and I heard this from a friend, I can't take credit for it, but you look at the word revolution and the key root word being revolve, going in circles, right? And if we really want to create something different and not just in a generation or two become the same people we were fighting, become the same energy we were fighting, then yeah, like you said, we got to do that inner work. Otherwise, okay, we get rid of the previous bad guys, but since we didn't do any of that internal work, it only takes so long before we start repeating the same actions, the same behaviors.
yeah. And so correct me if I'm wrong, but well, actually let me do this. So currently, do you believe that there is a genuine political solution?
Not in any way at all. It's not
Based.
even that I have no faith or no hope in the political system. I think that if we were to spend this whole podcast just kind of, let's look at the numbers, let's look at the stats, everything from like super basic normie arguments in the mainstream of like the electoral college, proves your vote, doesn't really matter, right? Then
Yeah.
you could get into the more, of course, conspiratorial, the things are rigged, the election voting machines can be hacked, the Diebold voting machines and others have been proven to be able to be hacked. We can get into that. And all those things are important, and if they help people, then great. I'm kind of like, yes, all that, and ultimately the whole thing is immoral in the first place. I think that like just the idea, I am an anarchist, I'm a voluntarist, and so I don't believe that even the idea that, well, we're going to vote somebody, like, let's say people out there put their hopes on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Cornel West or somebody else, right? And they're like, if we could just get in this other good person in there and we all vote, then they're going to go in there and do good things. But inevitably in the system that we have, representative democracy, constitutional republic, whatever, it forces everybody else to go along with the system. So everybody has this idea that, look, if we just vote for our team, I mean, in America, I don't think people really have this idea that they're doing it for the good of the country. It's kind of been reduced now to just like, we want to win. Who cares? Like, as long as it
My
beats that
sports
guy.
team.
Exactly. But, let's say 15, 20, whatever, in the most ideal minds of Americans, the idea was, okay, well, we won, and now we're going to put our agenda forward and for the best of America. Well, that still means that the other 30 to 40, whatever percent of Americans who chose to vote, which of course there's increasingly less people voting every year, which I think is a good thing. Even if you think you have the best plan for everybody and your team won, you still are going to force millions of people to go along with your agenda, even those who voted directly against you. And I know that people say, well, democracy, of course, it's flawed, but it's the best system we got. I just don't think, as we were saying a moment ago, that true freedom can be brought about that way. Even for, like, say, the American Libertarian Party or Constitution Party or whatever, people who may have the best of intentions and who might be more aligned, say, with some of the views that you or I hold, that's all well and good. But even then, forcing people to go along with that isn't going to actually get us there. I mean, people are going to be resistant. The change has to come from an inner knowing and an inner doing, like an understanding of what is necessary mentally, from your heart and from your mind, accepting, like, I have to take control of my own life. And that is a very difficult thing for most of our brothers and sisters out there to accept, that they are not going to be able to get to freedom, to bodily autonomy, to individual liberty, to a better world that I think we're really all after, even if we describe it differently, by simply just going and pressing a button every 4 years or pulling a lever or whatever the thing looks like now. That is, in fact, I think, outsourcing your power. It's kind of, and I get that there's people who are going to hear this who are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And they're just like, Derrick, I'm exhausted. Like, I've got living check to check. Like, I get it. I totally get it. I'm not a rich person by any means at all. And so the idea of like, well, so now you want me to go out there and do all this other work and learn how to get off big tech and learn how to grow my own food or do this or that. Like, it can be overwhelming for people. But that's just the cards that we were dealt. I don't think freedom is going to be handed to us by just saying, like, okay, well, the best I can do is put my faith in this person vote for them and believe that it's going to get the things I want. Because once again, even if that person is a saint and not a liar, like all politicians, and they do go in and do all the things they promised you they were going to do, still there is, in my mind, the immorality that forces the other 40 whatever percent that voted for the other team to go along with your agenda that you think is better for everybody, right? So it's like it's this kind of fighting over the ring of power and promising our vision is going to be good for most people, and just let us have that ring, just let us have that power, and then we'll do it for you. And then this, of course, inevitably sets up this cycle that we're in. Well, people from the other side, quote unquote, because I don't even really like to buy into this idea that we're so divided by like just these sides. Like that's what I call the predator class wants us to believe, is like, yeah, that's their team and they're our team. And surely enough, lots of people buy into that mentality, but that doesn't mean we need to live in it. We don't have, most people who their neighbors are not out there ready to kill them and fight them, and just attack them in the streets. That's not I think, true reality that most of us live in. Sure, there are divisions and there are perfectly legitimate philosophical and moral reasons to draw lines in the sand and say, hey, you're beyond the pale. I cannot align with you because you believe X, Y, and Z. But I don't think most people are really that deep. I think most of the average people, I've come to realize over the years and my efforts to quote unquote wake people up, that most people are just trying to make it every day. They've got kids, they've got families, they've got, their own interests. They want to get off work and like relax and watch a funny show or go out and hang out with friends or go to the bar. And I get it. And I totally respect all those things. And at the same time, the world is going to shit while people are just trying to like relax and just have a good time. And of course, this is all by design, keep you in the rat race so you don't have time to sit down and read books and think deeper and understand what we're dealing with on a philosophical manner, so that you're constantly just trying to catch up. And then so the best thing you think you can do is like, okay, well, I'm going to vote for that guy because maybe he'll at least lower my taxes a little bit. And, it's like they've got us focused on the near term, like what's going to be good. Okay, Trump or somebody says they're going to cut my taxes. And right now I feel like I'm paying too much. And if I could save any money, that might help me because it's, life is tough right now. And so you settle for that little bit of like scrap off the dinner table in the hopes that it's going to improve your day-to-day life. But in the bigger picture, they're marching the machine further and further into, this technocratic state, this tyranny.
Yeah. So just a little bit about myself, because it's relevant to my next question, or I guess the next portion of what I wanted to talk about. So, I mean, I'm highly involved in the Libertarian Party. I'm a voluntarist, but I still vote. I think it's like we have a toolbox and we have all these different tools, and voting is like a tool. I don't think it's a very useful tool. I don't think it's very, it's like using a ruler for something you need a saw for. It's not very useful, but I'm also not willing to just throw that tool away. However, there is this fundamental misunderstanding that I think people involved in the system, whether you're Constitution, Green, like even Democrats or anybody that still have, good intentions on that side, which is fewer and fewer, but how do, ethical people act in an unethical system? I think no matter what, this system is pretty much rigged against us. And there's no way for libertarians to actually be libertarian in the system. And so one thing that really attracts me to like what you're doing and people like John Bush is the exit and build strategy. I think that is key. That is something that people really should be focusing on. And not that these other things don't matter, but they should matter less, because what are you going to do when the steamroller of tyranny comes in and just steamrolls over all the work that everyone did for ballot access and all of these different things? So do you kind of want to give like a synopsis or just like a basic understanding of what exit and build is?
Sure. And, I just want to say, man, like, I don't want anybody, and you or anybody else listening, to take it that what I previously said, which I stand by 100%, means that you shouldn't get involved on a local level, state level, if you feel like you just expressed, like that it serves some purpose. In fact, some people may know that I ran for mayor of Houston 2 times, in 2023 and 2019, not necessarily because I thought becoming mayor was going to be able to solve all the problems. In fact, I thought I knew something about corruption, but running for mayor and seeing how, like, even on the local level, how wide the corruption is was definitely eye-opening. And part of me doing that was so I could show people as I'm running, like, hey, look, this media outlet is bound by law, according to FCC regulations, for whatever good they are, to put me on air because they gave other candidates airtime. And being able to showcase when Fox News on the local level or whoever was resisting that, or showing how, oh, this local political group is trying to keep people like me out of the debates and different things like that. So it was kind of a learning lesson. And it also did sort of instill further into me that I don't think that we're going to be able to fix it politically. But again, every time somebody stops a bad law, statewide, locally, and occasionally nationally, that's a good thing. I'm not saying like, okay, you wasted your time. Like, good. I'm glad that we should fight on all fronts. But obviously, my main focus is outside of the system. And I think that was kind of the key word that you said there, as far as like inside the system, it's hard for libertarians to be actual libertarians. And I don't want to go off on a tangent, but before I mention Exit and Build, this takes me to a place of, I've been in and around the libertarian movement since pretty much the beginning, like I said, before I even really understood what the word was. And I watched, like, with curiosity. I went to the RNC in 2012 and watched them screw Ron Paul over. I spoke at Liberty Fest in New York City for a couple of years. And for a good chunk of my first few years and my writing, my book, The Conscious Resistance Trilogy, is very much libertarian philosophy, voluntarist philosophy, agorist philosophy, my beliefs on all that. And I'm still a nerd for all that. I still love it. But I could even see after a while how the libertarians were kind of in their own echo chamber, in their own bubble of like, okay, we're hosting our events and it's the same people and we're having the same philosophical debates and discussion. But how many of these people are actually living the principles, like actually living them? Not just like, yeah, I'm a libertarian because I'm in the LP or because I wish there was less government. But in the meantime, I'm still paying taxes. I'm still doing this thing. I'm supporting subsidies and just all these different things that, to me, I just saw a disconnect from the philosophy and the principles of that philosophy and people's actual lives. And I think that is a huge problem with the broader, not just say LP, but the broader libertarian freedom movement, including those who have nothing to do with the LP. And so I've strived to, as I mentioned earlier, make my message through my books and my work and my journalism not just be something that I talk about, like, hey guys, here's some nice ideas, but something that I can say, hey, I'm living this way. I'm like striving to live as close to this message as possible. And yes, as you touched on, we're in a rigged system. There's no perfect way. I'm not here to victim blame and say, hey guys, you're doing this thing wrong. But I am surely here to say, why don't we actually try to live in line with our values? Why don't we strive to move closer towards that? It's an imperfect situation. It's an imperfect world, corrupted government. So it's not going to happen overnight. And in some areas, we still will fall short. But if we strive in that direction, and each of us who believe in freedom and liberty move in that direction, instead of just thinking about it kind of philosophically, like this morning online, I was kind of having a back and forth with somebody who's like, I'm a voluntarist, but I still believe in Donald Trump and this and that. And to me, I'm like, well, you're not really a voluntarist. Maybe you get it, like you get it in your mind, you understand it, you like the idea of it, but it's more than just, liking an idea. To me, you have to actually apply it to your life for it to have meaning. And so much of my work is inspired, including my book, the second edition of my book, How to Opt Out of the Technocratic State, which people can download for free at theconsciousresistance.com/how-to, is very much inspired by the work of Samuel Edward Konkin III. And he was the founder of agorism and counter-economics, and people can learn all about that. And he was part of the liberty movement. He was Canadian, and he came to the United States and was very active in the liberty movement in the 60s and the 70s, like the birth of the Libertarian Party. And he was always a critic of it from the beginning, because his thing was, he has like a really great quote in his first book, The New Libertarian Manifesto, where he says something to the effect of the consistent application of libertarian principles is what is going to lead to a libertarian society. And so every time you can stay in line with that principle, again, even knowing that we're in an imperfect world, and the more of us do that, then the closer we're actually going to get there, because he has, like, also in one of his talks, he had this funny little thought experiment saying, like, sure, anybody can claim to be libertarian, but it's all about actually living it, right? Because otherwise you can say you get arrested by a libertarian cop who's arresting you because you had some cannabis or something, and then they take you to the jail where there's a libertarian jailer who takes you to the cell, and there's a libertarian judge. It starts to lose meaning. It's like, yeah, everybody's a libertarian, but nobody's living in line with it. So my message and the idea of Exit and Build is is basically that. How do we apply these principles? And even if you don't consider yourself libertarian, but you're just like, I see the problems in the world, Derrick. I see them talking about digital identities and digital currencies like CBDCs, or stable coins that can be surveilled, or vaccine passports, or any number of things, like just the continued control, not to mention the poisoning of the food supply, the propaganda system through the education system, the spiritual, mental, psychosocial attack on us. All these different things, to me, are systems that we want to exit from. So it's like we're taking our money, our energy, our moral, spiritual support from those systems, and we're putting them into new systems. And this is where the build part comes in. Like, so that could literally be like, hey, I'm going to try to be less dependent on this big box grocery store that during COVID 1984 times, they required me to wear a mask, or they required me to show a PCR test just to get in. You know what? I don't want to just sit around and wait for the next time and then be stuck in this situation and be forced to do things I don't want to do, because that happened with a lot of people who are, oh, I'm so awake, but you haven't done anything about it. So here comes the bad things we all knew was coming, and you just have to go along with it because you didn't think ahead. You just sort of paid attention on YouTube. Let me watch this podcast, but never actually do anything in my life. Again, this is all about like action. What can we really do with our lives? So you recognize which systems do not align with your values, which systems, what I call slavery systems, which are going to lead in the near term to long term to less liberty, to less privacy, and start thinking of strategies and ways of how do you exit from those systems and build new ones, and or support those who are building new ones. You know, as an example, getting off big tech, using Linux, things like that. I don't use a phone personally, but my girlfriend, she uses a privacy phone, de-Googled phone. That's by my buddy's company, the Above Phone, AbovePhone.com. And he makes privacy laptops, privacy phones loaded with all the decentralized apps and open source, everything you're doing, but just a privacy version of it. Maps, you know, videos, podcasts, all of it. You can do all of that without supporting Google, without supporting Apple. Of course, there's a learning curve, but my point is I can't build those systems. So I support those who can build them, right? So I'm exiting from the big tech system in this example, and then we're going to support and build these new systems with somebody like Hakeem and others who are working on privacy apps and encryption and stuff like that. And that's just one area. And you take that idea and apply it to your food, okay? Like I mentioned, maybe your goal is in the next year to 2 years, I only want to get 1/3 of my food from the grocery store. And maybe that's just like specialty items. And so maybe you decide to put together a little windowsill garden, or put something in your backyard or front yard or whatever you have available. Or maybe you've got no space, limited space. You're living in a city, it's a tiny apartment. I guarantee you, wherever you are, there are probably some community gardens, other people interested in this, permaculture clubs, farmers markets even, where you can go. Again, it takes effort. This is not easy. This is not just pressing a button and voting. This takes maybe changing your habits, changing your lifestyle, changing your relationships to actually live in line with your principles. It's hard work, but if you actually care, maybe it's worth it. Maybe it's not to you, but you go make an effort. You come meet the farmers who have the products, whether that's meat and eggs and milk or veggies or all of the above. And, you know, where's your farm at? Can I come visit it on the weekend? I want to bring me and a couple of friends. Do you guys need any help? We're down to put in some volunteer time, and you're learning in the process. And usually if you go to community garden or an urban farm, you're going to go home with produce, with veggies and, you know, just fresh organic stuff. And you're going to learn in the process. You're also going to get your hands in the soil, get more connected to the planet. That has spiritual benefits as well. And so in each of these areas, you're starting to think of this process. How can I look at the different systems, the banking system, financial, food, education? If you have kids, I think this is a big important part of the picture too as well, because they're indoctrinating the children in so many different ways. You might not be a parent who's in a situation to homeschool on your own. You're working a lot, but the other important aspect of this exit and build strategy is community. We can't do this alone. So as we come together in community with like-minded people on the local level, maybe each of you, a couple of you are families and you have kids, and you realize, like, you know what? Maybe this would be cheaper and more affordable if the three of us with kids came together and we pool our resources together and we hire a tutor, and then we can all split the cost. And then that tutor, you know, is going to be teaching things that we think are appropriate and actually useful and educational to our children. And so it's not just me as one parent struggling doing it on my own. We come together, what we call freedom cells or freedom hubs, circles, hives, hubs, whatever, it doesn't matter. But you're coming together in local decentralized groups to get organized and to approach these problems. Because I don't think any of us, including myself, can handle this on our own, the sort of immensity of what we're facing, community is absolutely key. Back to what I was saying in the very beginning, not only for the, hey, I'm not alone, there's other people, on this journey with me, but because we need, more hands make light work, right? So the more we're working together as a group, we can be there for moral support. Maybe in addition to what I mentioned about the food and sort of having a plan, like, all right, by the end of this year as a group, we're all going to only be going to the grocery store, for rare items. We're going to focus on getting connected to local farms and community gardens to supplement our food. And then we're going to learn if we can, maybe one of us has a backyard in our group and they're going to let us all build a community garden there. And we meet on the weekends, we come together. I tell you, if you get together in a community garden and you bring some music and you bring some food, it turns into a party. It's a good time. It's not work. You're connecting. You're actually helping yourself. Like, this is the kinds of real efforts, what I consider the real voting with your actions, not just voting electoral politics. Of course, we talked about that. When it serves, do that. Defend yourself when you can, but also vote with your actions. Vote with the relationships you have, with the things that you teach your friends, your family, your children, yourself, the way that you have relationships, the way that the relationships you have with businesses, the relationships you have with big tech. And it is going to take effort, is going to take time. And, sometimes I'll have folks say to me, like just as recently as yesterday, a guy said, Derrick, I'm 67 years old. I tried all this in the past. I'm too old now to care. So I'm putting my faith in Trump. Do what you got to do. I think you're going to find that you will be let down once again, as we all have. Anybody who's put energy into politicians has been let down over, generations. But I don't think this matters what age you are. Like, if you're alive, if you're living, breathing human being, and you care about the future and you don't want to be sucked into tyranny, then make the effort. That's just really what it comes down to. I mean, I don't think there's really any excuses. And I say this to people who are like, whether you're, you're disabled or you're on limited income. Again, I'm not a rich guy. I'm not sitting here giving you solutions that cost $5,000. You could stop using Google right now. You could download a privacy browser right now. You could spend a couple hours while you're at work. And most of you probably listen to podcasts or watch videos anyways. Instead of just doom scrolling all day, why not watch a podcast about permaculture or some practical skill that you can actually use in your life? I think it's just all about our priorities. Really, it comes down to, like, is your priority truly, really maintaining and keeping the world, or at least your sector of the world, as free as possible for as long as possible? Because I know for me personally, I'm doing this for my 6 nieces and nephews who are all 15 and under, and watched the COVID tyranny and had to see friends in masks, and they probably think that's normal. Like, I'm thinking of them in the future. I'm thinking of if I ever have children in my future, and the coming generations and beyond. That is really what is my motivation, my inspiration, that keeps me activated and going. So it's not so much about just what we're going through. Yes, your life matters. Yes, you matter. But this is a much bigger thing in my view. This isn't just like, okay, are we going to get a few more libertarian policies in at the next administration? This is very much like, is humanity going to remain free? Is the idea of liberty going to survive more than just a couple hundred years? And it's not really looking that great, but I do think the more of us who focus on this exit and build strategy, it's not giving up, it's not being apathetic. As I said, it's actually a lot more difficult, more time consuming. It takes more energy, but I think it's also that much more rewarding to then live closer to your values and know that I'm not supporting those systems. I'm actually actively working on building what comes next. And none of us can predict or say what that looks like. But I know for me personally, the effort is absolutely worth it.
So what I find interesting is that, say everything goes according to plan politically, well, what then? I mean, we have to have something on the back end of that. So even if people aren't into this whole idea of the exit and build strategy, we still need it, because like, we roll back the state and then what? Like, we still need this system. And the reason I love it so much is because I'm a huge proponent of consent. And this is literally the people taking back their consent. We don't consent to be governed this way. And so instead of participating in their corrupt system, we participate in our own system, and we participate with our neighbors. Now, I don't know about you, but what I've noticed, trying to wake people up and trying to get people engaged in these different things, is that people want, like, instant gratification. And what's interesting is with this exit and build strategy, I've noticed you do get way more instant gratification and instant satisfaction than you do anything politically. Just myself, the way I instituted it for my life and my family's life, it every single month, a new skill. We do like a new thing, like making our own laundry soap, switching over to beef tallow, all of these different things. And we just once a month, we just do a little bit more, another step. And one thing that taught me how deeply entrenched we are into this, how much they're poisoning us, how much like restriction they have on us. And now I'm able to see that instant gratification. And now all of a sudden I make one 5-gallon bucket of laundry detergent, I'm good. My family's good for like a half a year just on that. And I'm not getting all these poisons into my clothes and all of these different things. And so I find it very interesting when I see people that are very resistant to this idea. And it's like, I understand it is a lot of work, but what's more important? Because if you do just hand it off to other people, this is what you're going to get. And then you're going to keep like, what are you complaining about is my thing, and that's why this is very attractive to me.
I love that example. And, you're right. Sometimes I think people can see it the opposite way where they're like, well, if I vote, then I'm going to know whether my team won or not right away, right? So I can get that instant gratification or instant disappointment right away. But they don't think of it in the ways that you just mentioned. I mean, I personally, like we've had this conversation that even if let's imagine all the bad stuff that the state is up to and efforts to create a global government and tyranny and intelligence networks and spying and surveillance, all the stuff we could go on and on about and things that I report on regularly. Even if those things disappeared and all of a sudden I realized, oh my God, actually I am a conspiracy theorist. I was just crazy and like none of this is going on. I wish that was true. But even if that was the case, I personally would still continue on this path, because I think it is a more rewarding mentally, physically, spiritually, financially lifestyle. I mean, this is why we bought land about 2 hours away from where I live in the city, where we're working with a community of people. Like I said, community is necessary. So we're working to build a community there where we can have our homes, where we can live. There's banana trees, there's avocado trees, there's fresh water, live in closer to the planet with clean water, with clean non-pesticide food, with non-GMO seeds, with other people who are like-minded, who want to keep growing as individuals. And then, our bigger picture is to have an education center so that we can host workshops and host retreats and bring people there and say, hey, here's the way we did this. Here's some skills that you can use, and bring other teachers who are further ahead of us than this and share. And that to me sounds so rewarding that even if none of this was going on, I'm still going on this path, one way or the other, because for me, this is why I'm not a reformist as well, besides just kind of philosophically thinking that it doesn't line up, is because the system is, there's the angle of the system is corrupted to the core. There's no way to fix it. But then there's the other angle. People say, no, it's not broken. This is the way they designed it so that we will never have a way out of this, a way to fix it within the system. Right. And so even if the conspiracies weren't true, just the mainstream basic system we have is flawed, is broken, is engineered this way, and isn't working for the people. Yep. So why would I want to spend the rest of my life I don't want to spend the rest of my life paying for electricity. I don't want to spend the rest of my life paying rent. I don't, it's just there's certain things that we have been conditioned to accept as normal, as just the way humans are, that I don't think are normal. And I think that, again, with effort, with time, with community, with energy, and yes, with some financial investments, we can change our personal worlds. And then, of course, the more that we do this, I've seen this with my girlfriend's life and my life, that in the beginning, we were the crazy, weird ones in the family. But now when people have questions about health or something, who do they come to? They come to us and say, hey, have you guys ever heard about this? Do you know anything about this thing I'm dealing with? Now my family is wanting to come to the events that we're hosting. They're listening, they're learning. And I'm not saying they're activists or, kind of doing what I'm doing or anything like that. But the point is, you start to, And as you influence the people around you, that those ripples go out further and further. So this to me goes back to the leading by example. And this is ultimately the voluntarist message. Not that we're going to change the world through the ballot box or through the bullet box, but that we, by being examples, are going to be like showing people like, look, this is what a healthy human looks like. Someone that's eating without, with as little poison as possible, who's got a healthy mental dialogue, and who is able to communicate compassionately and empathetically with other people, who isn't paying and funding war and the blowing up of children, who isn't supporting systems and companies that are surveying us and spying on us and don't have our best intentions at heart. This is what a person doing that looks like. And that looks like it might not be easy. It looks like it's a struggle, but you know what? If they can do that, I'm going to take this small step. And then it just keeps going and it keeps going. That is what I see as the beauty of this. So yeah, thank you for sharing that example, because I think sometimes those little examples, even down to like, hey, we're not using the poison, washing soap from the store with all the different toxins and things, and that gives people a concrete example of how it can start with what are seemingly small things, but it actually is a great example of you taking your power back in that way. Not only do you get to save some money and not have to go buy, even if you're buying the better brands that are organic and, free of all the other chemicals, still you go, it's like, that's the stage, right? You're a normie person buying Tide or whatever, poisons, you're using dryer sheets and this stuff in this particular example. And then you kind of maybe those things aren't so good. I'm going to throw those out. I'm going to buy like the 7th generation or whatever, some kind of more clean version. And then you're like, you know what, maybe I could just make this myself and then I don't need it for 6 months. So it's a process, right? And we all start somewhere in that journey. But if we start moving again towards this exit journey, we get to a place that is more healthy, that is more clean, and just more rewarding. And then through that, we get to inspire each other to go further and further. And so it's not a competition, but it is a battle for humanity's future, I think. And the more of us pursue that and just learn more skills, get more practical and useful, it will make it easier for each of us to not only survive the potentially hard times that we see in the horizon, but to thrive in the face of that and to say, oh yeah, as their world's collapsing, we're over here building something new. And not only that, when the people that we love and care about who've called us crazy in the past finally get it, when it's pretty late late in the game, we might be in a position to actually help them, instead of being like, oh shit, sorry, yeah, I knew all those things, but I didn't do anything about it, so I have to turn you away, and sorry, I can't give you anything. Instead of being in a position where it's like, yeah, you know what, we've got resources, we know people over here, I can give you some seeds, and being able to help more people. That is kind of like the role that I see myself playing, is like using the journalism and the public speaking and the work that I do to kind of educate, inspire, wake people up to issues, bring them to the philosophy and the solutions, and then continuing to try to pull people out of that matrix and show them like, hey, look at the new world we're building. And it's a full-time gig that those of us who choose to are going to probably be dealing with for the rest of our lives, because it's just that important. And like you said a moment ago, what else is more important than this? Like, I can't think of anything else that seems to matter as much as trying to make sure that we as individuals, as families, as communities, and as the broader human species can continue to survive and thrive into the future, and not just eke out an existence, but actually live a happy, fruitful, meaningful existence.
Yeah. So one thing, we don't have too much time left, but I definitely do want to get you back on, because I think there's a lot of avenues we could definitely go down. There's so much that we could touch on just on this subject alone. And I truly think this is the direction in which the liberty movement needs to be heading. I mean, I don't personally think everyone needs to be buying land. I've been trying to think of like an urbanized way to do this, to stay semi-rural or semi-urban and still be able to do this. Maybe you have some better ideas about that, but I don't think everyone needs to do it quite the exact same way. But taking your power back, I think is the whole point to this. And I think that's where people need to be focusing, because I mean, just in my short lifetime, I'm 32, and it's like I don't see any reason to do anything politically. Like I said, it's like a ruler when you need a saw. It's like a waste of time. Like my name's on the ballot here in my home state, running for a state office, but I'm not actively campaigning. I don't see the purpose in it. But there is an option if people want that. However, I'm going to sit here and rather teach people about Goldbacks and Monero, and I'm going to teach them about how making their own products are so much better. So, but one thing I wanted to ask you about, oh yes, Goldbacks. I actually interviewed Jeremy Corden not too long ago, about a year ago at this point.
This one's the Utah one too.
Yes, absolutely love it. Home of the Goldbacks, man. And you know what? What's funny is every single time I use one, everyone says no right at first. I explain what it is, and then they come back. And they always end up paying, or they always end up accepting it. It's hilarious every time. They're like, wait a second, this is
nice.
This is gold.
Building that counter economy, man. That's important.
Yeah. So one thing I did want to ask you about before we take off, and this is another reason to have you back, but exactly what is going on with the David Hamblin case right now?
You know what, man? Why don't we just set another call, and I definitely will come back, because I want to make sure we do that story justice. And I know that you have some, obviously you're in Utah, and we could get real deep on that. And it is one, that we can set it up for later this week or next week, so it doesn't have to be far off in the distance, because it's such a big topic. I don't want to just rush through it and give people, an inadequate understanding of it. But yeah, it's absolutely something we could talk about. Anybody who's curious before the next conversation can just go to theconsciousresistance.com. There's a section on my website called Utah Ritual Abuse, and you can learn more about that. But I'm happy to come back, brother, and talk about it. And just one other thing you said a moment ago about, like, I also agree. I don't think there's one. In fact, there's a quote from Konkin that's really cool. He said something along the lines of, there's not one single straight line, straight path to liberty. And I've always agreed with that. Like, there's many directions. Like, I think there's some things that we can say, these are kind of wasted time, but generally speaking, each of our paths are going to look differently to get there. So yeah, I don't necessarily think it all has to take place on land. I would say if you live in a place like New York City, you're probably not going to find much, liberty in there. But obviously there's cities of different sizes with, the agendas are different. Like London is the most heavily surveyed city in the world. Houston, where I'm from, they're putting up digital billboards and 5G and cameras, but that's not the same as living 45 minutes outside of the city. It's a totally different environment. So yeah, I think that people should do what works best for them. I think land is a good investment if you can get that, whether on your own or the community. But generally speaking, it doesn't matter. If you're living in the suburbs, you're living on the edge of the city, just fight for what you have. In my book, I actually talk about the exit and build idea as part of kind of where I mentioned there's three paths you can take, and I'll just wrap up with this. One would be the path that none of us here are taking, and that is what I call in the book, apathy is death. And that is just literally like, you see what's going on and you choose not to act. Like, it's essentially a spiritual death, and in the long term, it's going to be a physical death, because you're going to be living in tyranny. The other one would be exit and build, like I've already explained. And so exiting and build is both in terms of philosophically, like, I'm going to stop using Google, exit from that system. But it often can be, as people found out during COVID, like, okay, I'm living in a very tyrannical city. They did not handle COVID great. I'm going to move, an hour away where the other small town did a lot better. And I'm going to exit from that and go build somewhere else. So it can mean that too. And in those terms, as far as physical location, the other third option is what I call holding down the fort. And it's just as it sounds. So if you're somebody who are like, you know what, this is my hometown, this is where I grew up, this is where my family's at, I'm committed here, I'm going to fight to the bitter end, that's great. And you should still focus on exiting and build. You should still focus on strategies to try to build local community. If you feel like you're committed to a place, maybe because like there's already community there, there's already farmers markets, and there's a lot of opportunity, or maybe there's nothing and you see an opportunity to build it. Whatever the case may be, I fully think that that's part, that's an option too. If you're somewhere where you're committed for whatever reason, or whether you choose to, or some people are like, I can't leave because of money, or because I've got this situation or a job or whatever the case may be. The same solutions apply, whether you're going to hold down the fort or whether you're going to exit and build and move to somewhere else. Focus on trying to get yourself and as many people as you know out of these systems, people educated about what's going on, educated about the technocratic state and the surveillance state that's being erected around us, and getting them to think about alternative currency like Goldbacks, or getting them to think about getting off big tech and all these ideas. So the same thing still applies, whether you're going to stay one place, whether you're going to move to a different city, a different state, a different country, whatever your location is, still focus on how you can exit and build from these other systems that we know are not going to lead to long-term liberty.
Hey, Derrick, thank you so much for joining me today. I know today was a little bit of a shorter interview, but honestly, I think it was still great. I think, short, punchy, and to the point. So I want to thank you so much. Everyone, make sure and go check out what Derrick has going on. I've made sure to link everything in the episode description. And a couple of the things that we talked about, like his book and the Utah ritual abuse case, aren't in there. But after this, I'll make sure and go and link that so everyone can go check this out. Now, last question, because I always ask everyone this before we part. Why does liberty matter at all?
It's a great question. Liberty matters because without it, I don't think we really have life. I mean, sure, we can live and we can breathe and we can continue to eat and be physically alive, but what is a life without the liberty to choose, your path, without the liberty to choose how you want to raise your kids, the liberty to choose what you want to put in your body or not put in your body, the liberty to choose if you want to start a business, the liberty to choose who you want to love, all these things. I mean, what is life without that? I don't think it's anything worth living. So to me, there's no real life, there's no real hope without liberty. And hopefully we can keep the idea alive, because it still is, unfortunately, a very relatively young idea in humanity's history.
It is. Hey, thank you so much, Derrick, once again.
You're welcome.
And hang out for just a second. We'll finish right up on the back end. Everyone else, thank you for tuning in. Go to risetoliberty.com/links. That's the master link. It will pull up everything. Find your favorite platform. Go to the alternatives if you're on the main ones. Make sure and check out what Derrick's got going on. And otherwise, until next time, stay free, my friends. Nice.